The claim that Israel has a biblical right to take over the Middle East is not merely a political statement. It is a claim loaded with theological assumptions, historical implications, and moral consequences. Such a claim is often challenged by Muslim theologians and critics of religious nationalism, who argue that sacred scripture should not be used as a justification for modern territorial expansion. From this perspective, no scripture should be treated as a blank check for conquest, displacement, or domination. The covenant with Abraham is understood not as a license for oppression or ethnic supremacy, but as a sacred responsibility tied to faith and moral conduct. In the Quranic worldview, divine covenant is connected to righteousness, justice, submission to God, and moral accountability. It is not based merely on race, ethnicity, or political control over land. A central point in the Islamic reading of Abrahamic history concerns the identity of the son associated with the great sacrifice. While Jewish and Christian traditions generally identify Isaac, Islamic tradition identifies Ishmael. This distinction is theologically significant because Ishmael is not viewed in Islam as an outsider to the Abrahamic covenant. Rather, he is seen as central to the universal continuation of Abraham's mission. Through Ishmael came the line associated with Prophet Muhammad. Through Prophet Muhammad, Muslims believe that the Abrahamic message of pure monotheism was restored in its final form. Within this Islamic theological framework, the inheritance of the land from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates is not viewed merely as a question of ethnic descent or political possession. Rather, it is interpreted as a covenantal fulfillment linked to the eradication of idolatry and the restoration of the religion of Abraham. Historically, this interpretation sees the spread of Islam across the lands associated with the Abrahamic promise as a fulfillment of that covenantal inheritance. Through the descendants of Ishmael and the followers of Prophet Muhammad, the message of the oneness of God, Tawheed, spread across the region. In this reading, the land was not inherited through racial superiority, ethnic nationalism, or modern state power. It was inherited through the triumph of Abrahamic monotheism over shirk, or the association of partners with God. The deeper issue, therefore, is not merely who controls territory, but whether the land is associated with the worship of the one God and the rejection of idolatry. The true mark of Abrahamic inheritance, according to this view, is not bloodline alone, but faithfulness to Abraham's creed, submission to God, rejection of false gods, and commitment to divine justice. Another important Quranic passage in this discussion is Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 133, where Jacob asks his sons what they will worship after him, and they answer that they will worship the one God, the God of Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, and Jacob, and submit to him. In an Islamic theological reading, this verse presents the true descendants of Jacob, or Israel, as those who ultimately return to the religion of Abraham, understood in Islam as submission to the one God. Some interpreters extend this idea by arguing that the true descendants of Israel who sincerely preserve the Abrahamic faith would eventually be absorbed into Islam, the final form of the religion of Abraham. Within this view, groups such as Palestinians, sometimes linked by certain historical arguments to ancient Judah, and Afghans, sometimes associated in popular traditions with the 10 lost tribes of Israel, are seen as possible examples of Israelite-descended peoples who entered Islam. Nevertheless, the debate surrounding these ethnic identifications persists, despite the endorsement of some Israeli historians. Even within the biblical tradition, the land promise is not always presented as detached from obedience to God. The prophets repeatedly warned the Israelites that injustice, arrogance, bloodshed, and oppression would bring divine judgment. For this reason, critics argue that a claim of biblical right without justice becomes deeply problematic. It risks turning sacred covenant into political ideology dressed in religious language. From an Islamic perspective, Abraham was neither a nationalist conqueror nor a tribal supremacist. He was a model of pure monotheism, submission, hospitality, and moral uprightness. To invoke Abraham as a justification for dispossessing another people is therefore seen by critics as a betrayal of the ethical spirit of Abrahamic faith. The Middle East, in this theological view, does not belong to any modern government by automatic divine entitlement. It belongs to God, who commands justice among all peoples, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and others. Therefore, no state should claim sacred permission to dominate, expel, or dispossess another people in the name of religion. A more honest Abrahamic theology would reject the use of Scripture as a weapon of domination. It would insist that divine covenant must be joined with justice, mercy, and submission to God. In this reading, the true heirs of Abraham are not those who expand borders by force. They are those who uphold the oneness of God, Tawhid, reject idolatry, practice justice, and submit sincerely to the one God, following the religion of Abraham in faith, worship, and moral responsibility.